Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session on how do the proposed inheritance tax changes affect you. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the panel for this session. First, we have Moira O'Neill, who will moderate the panel, renowned financial journalist writing and speaking on money and investing for publications including the Financial Times, Investors Chronicle, Money Week, The Times and Daily Mail. Then we have Lindsay Cook, a highly experienced financial columnist with the Financial Times and Connections Radio. Nimesh Shah, CEO of Blick Rothenberg, a tax advisor with over 15 years' experience in practice. And Malvee Vaja, a chartered financial planner with Rathbones and fellow of the Personal Finance Society. Over to you, Moira. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we're here to discuss Britain's most hated tax in relation to our pensions, which should be a fascinating topic, but possibly a bit of a painful topic for those of you in the room as well. I'm delighted to have my guests with us to help discuss some stuff. But I think we're going to start with Lindsay, who has some personal experience of being in the situation where you're thinking very much about this topic in relation to your own finances. Lindsay, could you explain where you are with this?
Absolutely. I never thought I'd ever complain about inheritance tax. I thought the £1 million limit for a couple giving money to their children was pretty adequate. And if you complained about it, well, it was a first world problem. But then we had a budget, and I have two sons, and when pensions were reformed, until then, I had a pension. But from then, I've had a family pension in my mind, because with annuities, you lost the money when you died, whereas with a pension pot, it's still yours, and it means you actually look after it better in your later years so that you keep on growing, whereas you can't do that with an annuity. So I had in my mind that my sons, who are in auto-enrolment, so their employers give them 3% towards their pensions, which is rubbish compared to what my generation, our generation, have had. And I thought, therefore, when I pop my clogs, they will get my pension free of tax, and that sets them up because they've probably only got about 50,000 in their pension pots at the moment. If I can give them a good head start, that's fine. And then the budget happened, and doing the sums, I reckoned I was going to be paying an extra £200,000 in inheritance tax. Now, it's not that easy, because I'm earning, and that's why I haven't drawn down much from my pension. Do I draw money from the pension now and pay a high rate of tax? Or do I pay the high rate, or do my children pay a high rate of tax when I die? It's a bit of a conundrum.
Yes.
And I resent the idea, even if there are insurance brokers in the room, I resent the idea of buying a policy to pay off the inheritance tax when I die. And I haven't looked at the figures, but I imagine they're very expensive. And it is as bad a deal probably as annuities were. So we had the pensions revolution, and this is upsetting a lot of people. And we're paying 40%, and we're not on the streets. The farmers are only going to be paying 20%, and they've got 10 years to pay it. So it's a conundrum. And that's where we are, although I have already started doing things to try and mitigate.
Excellent. So we'll hear more on that later, what Lindsay's actually doing. But this hasn't come in yet. There's been a long government consultation on the practicalities of it. So we've got some sense of the planning that's going to have to happen. But a lot of people have been told by their advisors don't do anything yet, because until it actually comes in, it's not a done deal. And I know some advisors have been saying there may even be a subsequent government where it all gets rolled back anyway. But Nimesh, can you talk us through the politics of how it happened and what your take is on the situation?
Yeah, no, thanks, Moira, and thanks for sharing the story, Lindsay. It's a familiar story that we're hearing from lots of clients and friends who have this conundrum, the word that you used about pensions. But we go back 10 years. We were here 10 years ago. Pensions were in the inheritance tax regime 10 years ago. And I'm not going to make any friends in this room right now, but actually, the regime back then had pensions very firmly in IHT, and that was largely accepted. That was accepted. That was the rule 10 years ago. And then we have this strange sort of George Osborne budget, if people remember that far back, where he completely reformed pensions overnight. And no one expected this. I think it was kind of a bit of a Super Bowl moment for George Osborne. It was politically brilliant as well because it won them the next election around pensions freedoms. But a byproduct of pensions freedoms and pensioners driving around in Ferraris was that inheritance tax was not applied on pensions anymore. And suddenly you had this wave of advisors, and I can hold my hand up there, I'm sure Malvee was the same, that actually pensions became quite a valuable tool for inheritance tax planning. But if you roll back to actually what a pension is there for, the whole purpose of the pension is to provide an income in your retirement. It was never designed for the purpose of the pensions regime. It was never designed to be an inheritance tax tool. But because we have these strange rules through Osborne, people did use them that way, and that was fair game, and that would have been the advice that we gave following pensions freedoms and inheritance tax exemption on pensions, to say actually put more money into pensions. And I can speak from my experience that my father, who's now in his 70s and was working up until about 2 years ago, my advice to my dad was actually, if you've got an inheritance tax problem, we should put some more money into his pension, because he was earning a modest salary from some work that he was doing. He didn't need that money, and we banged that into the pension to say, actually, this is inheritance tax free. Where we are right now is a whole mess of political horseplay between the now Labour government and the former Conservative government, who said that we will abolish the lifetime allowance, which was actually designed again to help the medics come back into the profession because we had a shortage of NHS doctors, and Labour immediately reacted, which wasn't helpful at all at the time, and said, we will reinstate the lifetime allowance. As time went on, I think they realised that was going to be viciously complicated, and it would have created even more of a mess than what we've got right now. And so what they did was look at the whole inheritance tax regime, and which is why we had the budget that Lindsay isn't too happy about right now, where she's managed to annoy pensioners, farmers and family businesses. You did well in your first budget to go and do that.
Yeah, and now we've got a situation where we've got some plans in place for how inheritance tax is going to be taken from the pensions, but it all looks like it's going to be a pretty messy state of affairs. So your poor family, after you die, are going to have to try and figure this out. Maybe Nimesh, you could explain how it's potentially going to work.
Yeah, we don't know all the detail yet, and I think you made a really important point, Moira. The consultation is technical and practical rather than actually the principle, which is, again, a very strange way of how government has reacted to tax changes over the last few years, but that's maybe a different subject for a different day. So what we know right now is that the pension could pay the inheritance tax, so 40% will come out of the pension, and when your beneficiaries inherit the pension, they'll have to pay up to 45% income tax on that. So you get this effective rate of tax of up to 67%. That's the headlines in the press, that's the rate of tax that you're going to suffer.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for explaining that. So, Malvee, you have a lot of clients in this situation, for financial planning clients. What are they worried about? Are they hoping that it's all going to be rolled back? And if they say that to you, what do you then say to them?
I think, like Nimesh said, you have to plan for the current regime, and the current regime is looking like it's the pensions are going to be in your estate from April 2027. I think the issue is that, the government does need to do this. And again, I'm not going to make any friends by saying this, but we've got a huge deficit, and they are looking at ways to plug this, whether it be taxing pensions or increasing state pension age. There are things that need to be done to reduce that deficit, and I think that's just the nature of where we are, and clients do understand that as well.
So no chance of it being rolled back, we reckon.
If I were to put money on it, I'd say that no, I'd put my money on it not. As much as I would like to say that, it's always a possibility. That never rule anything out, and I think that's the key here. But yeah, we can't sort of continue doing this whole giving, not taxing the pensions as a way of bringing in some revenue, but then also supporting the state pension, because people are living longer, so the government cannot sustain that state pension for the length of people that are in retirement. People are living into their 90s now, and we have a lot of clients that can live without their state pension.
Yeah. So we're in a situation where some people may even have been taking assets that are non-pension to live on in retirement and keeping the pension for later. And what can you do in that situation? Now you're thinking about reversing things. What tips do we have as a panel to think about that? I mean, maybe Lindsay, you could start by explaining some things you're thinking of doing or have done.
I didn't do this smartly. I did it because circumstances were where they were. But one of my sons wanted a quite chunky deposit to buy his first house, and I didn't want to take that several £100,000 out of my pension. So I looked at equity release, and it's something as a long-term journalist I'd hated in the 80s, and I looked at it and I found that I could borrow several £100,000, not pay any interest, and the interest on it rolling up was only 2.5%. This was some years ago when interest rates were very low.
And with equity release, you can stay in your own home.
You stay in your own home as long as you want to. And it rolls up. And I looked at the figures and I thought, well, if I lived to something like 90, I'd only be paying something like £150,000 interest. So we did this. House value has gone up in the meantime, but it means that the 300,000 or 400,000 that we borrowed is now off the house, and so that sort of mitigates the pension money. I've got a second son, and I think, judging from the Guardian and the Times today, I need to act quite quickly to give them, and live 7 years, but I need to act quite quickly to have a second go at my home, which has, since I took this money out, gone up in value about £250,000, so I'm almost covering the loan, but give him, take out equity release. The interest rates are higher now, they're about 5 to 6%, so I have to think about it, but take out equity release for him, get him the equivalent property to his brother, because you've got to be fair to both of them.
Very true.
You do.
Yep.
And so that is my next aim. And I don't know, I hope I don't have to do it before the budget, but if they are going to stop the 7-year rule...
For anyone who didn't read The Guardian and The Times this morning, there are new rumours out there, I'm afraid. So that it's lifetime gifting might be limited, apparently. Not we should ever be act on rumours, but there's more flying around, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we'll deal with what's actually here in the legislation and the plans at the moment. So obviously it hasn't come in yet. Lots of people are reacting to the change already. Are there dangers of overreacting, Nimesh?
Oh, 100%. And we saw this time last year with the rumours again. And we don't have the final rules. And maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic that a future government will reverse some of it. And if we do have, God help us all, if we have a Nigel Farage government and inheritance tax is abolished. So, yeah, there'll be people in the room here who are happy about that, but there might be other problems there. So not reacting to these changes that are happening and thinking about your inheritance tax planning holistically is always what we talk about. I start with when a client does come to talk to us about inheritance tax planning. Actually, the simplest thing you can do is give it away or spend it all.
It's my favourite inheritance tax advice, honestly. It's the easiest and simplest way is to gift it
Or go skiing, spending the kids' inheritance.
Spend it.
Is the
Or if
phrase.
I watched Brewster's Millions a few weeks ago on Sky Movies, and it reminded me of trying to blow, I think it was $30 million in 1 week. So you could have a great time as well with your inheritance tax planning if you want to follow Brewster. But you do need to look at it in the round. I think what's happened is with pensions, because it's so emotive, and I can see this with the farmers and the family businesses, farmers more so, is it's very emotive around your pension. And because you feel kind of something's been taken away because you had this exemption and now you're in inheritance tax or soon about to be, people are really reacting about what to do with their pensions. So things that we've seen, and maybe a bit of reckless thinking here, is people are withdrawing, because you can do through pensions freedoms, withdrawing large sums of money through their pension, paying effective rates of income tax of over 45%, and then gifting that money away. But you could be in a worse situation around that if you were to die within we have a 3-year taper for inheritance tax. For those that are familiar with it, after 3 years, the effective rate of inheritance tax goes down by 8%. But if you die within those first 3 years, then you've got a bigger problem. Now, some advice around this has been, which I've seen, I've not necessarily advised on myself, is you can use something called normal gifts out of income and start to crystallise more income tax and income during your lifetime by drawing down on your pension and then gifting that away and not having the 7-year rule. Now, there can be a bit of subjectivity around this. It needs to be done properly. But again, we're seeing quite extreme reactions around using the pension before anything else. And I think that's my point of what I'm seeing, that people are focusing so much in on the pension, but then not thinking about the other assets that are part of your estate. And we do need to look at that, as I say, holistically. So get your balance sheet right, have a look at all your list of assets. What is easy to play with? The pension still could be, as part of your planning, still the last thing you may want to access, because it is tax-free growth as well. So let's not forget that. Let's not just take it all out and react to it, because you're then losing some income tax and CGT efficiency.
Very good point. Now, after a lifetime of saving up and growing your money and thinking about, have I got enough for retirement? And also, possibly, have I got enough for long-term care at the end of it, which is the rainy day that doesn't always happen to people, but you always worry about it. I mean, my parents are worried about that in particular, and they're just in their 80s. But this psychological switch, Malvee, is difficult, isn't it, from being a sort of saver to a spender?
Yeah, I think we see it a lot with our clients, because most people have spent their whole life accumulating wealth. They do this whole, saving and investing, and a very big focus on investing and not necessarily planning. And I think that's where people make a lot of mistakes, is they're not planning as they go along. They just focus on that wealth accumulation side of things. And there's certain things that you can do along your lifetime that help with the inheritance tax planning. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, and Nimesh has got pensions for his 2-year-old. Those are small bits that you can do, using your kids' pension allowances, junior ISA allowances, there's things like that, ensuring that you yourself are using your and your partner's annual gifting allowances, which are £3,000. And remember, that one you can use last year's allowance as well if you haven't used it. But the big thing is about getting to real grips with your income, expenditure, and sort of using cash flow planning. So that's where having an advisor really, really helps, is to understand what happens if you take an equity release loan out. If you were to gift a large amount out of your estate, what does that actually do to your long-term planning? What happens? What can you afford to spend and sort of end up with a very little inheritance tax to pay? You might be thinking that your household expenditures are around £50,000-60,000 a year, and you'll continue that into retirement, but that might leave you with a significant inheritance tax problem at the end of your life. So what do you need to spend? What do you need to start spending now to make inheritance tax less of a problem in future? That's what a financial planner can help guide you with. And then there's things like BPR, so business property relief, EIS investments as well. And I think a lot of people tend to leave inheritance tax planning too late in life, but actually things like EIS investments, when done in the right way as part of a portfolio with mixed investments, high, low risk, etc., that are right for you. If you do that at the right time, in your 40s, 50s, when you actually can get the income tax relief as well as the inheritance tax relief, I think that's another way to help mitigate IHT.
EIS, for those who don't know, is Enterprise Investment Scheme, another tax advantage scheme, but you're investing in high risk companies basically, and there are inheritance tax advantages of doing it as well as income tax advantages.
But please do seek advice, because it should be part of, it shouldn't be the only investment vehicle you use. It should be part of a diverse portfolio.
I would add that it's okay, and this is counterintuitive from a tax advisor, it's okay to pay a bit of tax.
Yeah.
And the effective rate of inheritance tax that's paid in this country, because people do plan, or a lot of people do plan, because 40% is a bitter pill to swallow, and there's a Laffer curve point here where people react behaviourally around a tax rate, and you certainly see this with IHT, but the effective rate of tax is something like 15%. If you plan properly, it could be low as 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what I certainly see with my clients. So it's okay to pay a bit.
Yeah, and I think that's fair.
Great. Well, you've mentioned pensions for children, which is one way you can take your pension money out of this tax advantage situation, but put it into, you can do it for the grandchildren too as well, can't you? Set up various ones and then it keeps growing free of tax and taxes on income and growth. Lindsay, were you keen on that for your boys?
It's something I'm considering because auto-enrolment is regarded as this wonderful thing, but it doesn't provide a pension for people when they get old.
Yeah.
They pay 5% in, their employers now pay 3% in. Mm-hmm. When I was young, my employers were paying 15, 20% into my pension, and I was paying 7.5%, 10%. So that's one of the reasons why I've got quite a good pension pot. Mm-hmm. So we've got to do something. Mm-hmm. They are fortunate. They will not still be paying mortgages when they retire, but the statistics out this week were showing that, an enormous number of people are still paying mortgages in their 70s. Now, they draw down their pension or they take a pension. How can they live? Also, there's a growing number of people who are privately renting and they reach retirement age. And so finances on pensions is going to be disastrous. I'm glad I won't live to see it. It's one of those things. Yes, I will be giving money to my grandchildren through pensions. That's a nice small amount of money. You don't have to really worry about it too much. And
you think they'll be grateful for it in the end?
They won't know about it until the end because. But it is that sort of thing you have to think about. Yeah. But the whole thing with pensions, not a great fan of George Osborne, but I thought it was a brilliant move because apart from anything else, we're all concentrating on our pensions more. Before, we just accepted our employer would say, oh, you're retiring next week, you can get your annuity by calling this number. The rates were rubbish at that time. They're a little bit better now, but they were still pretty rubbish. And you had to live till about 110 to get all the money. Otherwise, the insurance company was getting the leftover cash. Now, we're having a battle about the leftover cash, but at least we're having the battle, and it's not the big insurance companies who are just getting richer as a result of it. So I think we are concentrating on pensions more. That is good. We are thinking about our children's pensions, because most of us are sorted out to some extent, but there's no way the current government or any government can increase the amount that employers pay for employees in pensions, because we saw what happened with national insurance. So this is going to continue with people not paying enough into their pensions. So we do have to do something to help.
And the compounding for a child, even if you put a very small amount in, so I think if you put 2 tax years worth, £7,000-ish, by the time they reach retirement age, they'll have more than £500,000 in a pension, really, which will should do if all goes well, and that'll be you're sorting their retirement out for them right at the beginning.
And not quite so spectacular, but if we made auto enrolment from 18, then that would give another 3-4 years of pension contributions. But again, employers will not want it, and I can understand why. I'm not painting them as the evil people, but it's a difficult nut to crack.
I think on the pension side, you've got to remember, you don't have to, the pension doesn't have to pass just to your children. You can pass it on to your grandchildren as well. You can nominate your grandchildren or nieces, nephews to inherit it. And I think, if you've got, for most people, grandchildren will be under the age of 18 when they pass. So that might be a good way to sort of to pass the money on to your grandchildren rather than leaving it to your children, who are likely to be the 45% taxpayers at that time.
So is this going into your pension and looking at who's the nominated beneficiary?
As a death beneficiary.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
so it skips a generation.
Yeah, you don't have to. It doesn't have to go to your children.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, in terms of potential solutions for inheritance tax, we have mentioned life insurance. And Lindsay, obviously you're not a fan, but Malvee, are you using this with clients, and in what situation does it work to ensure a potential inheritance tax?
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's very small. The amount of clients that want to use life insurance as you can, as Nimesh sort of said, that we use it in cases where clients have gifted large amounts, and it's something that we would recommend. If you're going to gift a large amount, a gift inter vivos policy, which is a life insurance policy that pays out for inheritance tax. And it's designed that way so that the first 3 years after the gift, the insurance policy pays out 40% of the value of the gift, and then it tapers down so that after the end of the 7 years, when there's zero to pay, you stop paying the premiums. And that is still a cost-efficient way to cover yourself from that inheritance tax liability. And like you said, Nimesh, it's, the effective rate of tax there is much lower because you're paying those premiums which are nowhere near the inheritance tax that you're likely to pay. But it is a way to do these things. The simplest way, as I said, is gifting out of income and gifting it away. But if you are really worried about that IHT liability, you think that you don't want to worry about something happening to you and then your children having to pay that inheritance tax, I think the life insurance policy is a great way of doing it.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much. Now, the other solution that people used to be very keen on was AIM shares, so alternative investment market shares. If you held some of those, you could potentially avoid inheritance tax. But Nimesh, the rules have changed, haven't they?
Yeah, the old rules were and again, it's part of, I think, more maybe Malvee's area as well, that part of your overall investment profile, there might have been a component of AIM listed shares in a hugely volatile market, so you need to take the right investment advice. But for tax purposes, strangely, in the legislation, it was absolutely black and white that AIM shares attracted 100% relief from inheritance tax because it fell into the business property relief rules.
I think you had to hold them for 2 years or something.
I told them for 2 years, yeah. But it was, again, the way that it was used, that I've seen used, I'm sure, Malvee, you've seen the same, is if you've got someone in your 70s, 80s that are thinking about a large gift when you have to survive 7 years, actually go into the AIM market after 2 years are out of IHT, but you've got this investment fluctuation that you need to bear. But lots of stories around, and this is way before the Labour government, governments and Treasury looking at the AIM market and the inheritance tax relief that was attached to it. So last year, as part of Rachel Reeves's budget, and I think this went under the radar because it's all been dominated by pensions and farmers, is now the relief is 50%, which actually is a better place than we thought it might be. We thought that actually relief for inheritance tax on AIM shares would have been abolished completely. What is important is, though, that for farmers and family businesses, you get this 1 million limit, which you may have heard of in the press and in the news, but you don't get that for AIM shares. So there is no tax-free amount for AIM shares. It's just a flat 50%, which gives you an effective rate of tax of 20. So it still maybe has a place to play. It's just not as generous as it used to be.
Brilliant. So that's something you can think of if you want to take some speedy action in one sense. Now, we have mentioned gifting being the simplest solution, and there are all sorts of rules around gifting that people get very confused about. There's an annual allowance or allowances for if your kids get married, that kind of thing. But there's this one that, again, flies under the radar a bit, which is gifts out of income can avoid that 7-year rule. So if you can document it. What do you need to document, though? I mean,
so
is it tricky?
Good to get your thoughts as well, Malvee.
I was going to say you need to have a pattern.
Yeah.
That's the big thing, is to establish a pattern of that gifting and making sure that you are not going to run out yourself at the end of it. So if you want to start drawing more income from your pension and you start gifting money away, that's absolutely fine. Those gifts out of income won't suffer the 7-year lens as such. As long as there's a pattern of that expenditure, you'll be. It does fly under the radar, as you say. But make it, keeping some sort of list. It doesn't have to be, intelligent. It just needs to be an Excel spreadsheet. Gift time, who it was gifted to, and that is enough to establish a pattern. It's something for your executors to say, this is what this person has been doing for the last 20 years.
There is a form on HMRC's website as well that some people use that can document normal gifts out of income as well. We do it for a number of our clients, so they use us as accountants, and we just record it every year. We keep a file for them and their executors, so that in the event of their passing and an inquiry from the revenue, there's a clear record there. And it's very difficult then for HMRC, where someone has kept proper records and you can get the press of a button and go, here you go. Yeah. It's difficult for them to then challenge it, but I completely agree with Malvee. It's got to be done properly. And where someone claims that I've got I'm giving away 100 grand out of their 100 grand income for that year, you've got to be still kept in the lifestyle that you're accustomed to. Otherwise, actually, what you've got is a 7-year gift.
Okay, so that's where it could slip up. Yeah. Is it worth also writing a letter of intention or something around it, saying
I would say that's you've got a will as well. Use your wills and powers of attorney and things like that. The will, it's still a really important document when it comes to financial planning. So yeah, you can have a letter of wishes, but the gifting out of income, that's it's what you've actually done. The letter of wishes is more about how your intents behind the will and what you want to do.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what happens if you think it's too late really to do anything? I mean, could you be in that circumstance, or is there always some form of action you can take to reduce an inheritance tax bill?
I don't think it's ever too late.
No, and sadly, I've been doing this for too long now. I've seen some sad stories as well. A couple of years ago, a very, very wealthy prospective client had a meeting in the diary the week after, and he died literally 2 days before the meeting to talk about inheritance tax planning. Now, he was on his 60s, 70s, and we were doing a bit of brainstorming before. There was loads of things we could have done, loads of things, and that would have immediately made a big difference given what his estate looked like. But yeah, no, it's never too late to do something. Even if, and these are slightly more esoteric examples, but we had a client a number of years ago who paid our professional fees for 10 years. And that would have kept his companies and kept his family and accountancy fees for the next 10 years. And that immediately saved inheritance tax there. Now, again,
that's a good plug for taking financial tax advice, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose my plug there was, and actually it was his idea, so I can't take any credit, but he said it's a 40% discount on your fees.
Yeah.
So there are, never too late.
No.
Yeah.
Great.
No, it isn't. And as couples, you can pass all your estate to your partner free of tax. And so marry somebody younger than yourself, and then you can pass it over to them.
Very good tip. I like your style. Unfortunately, people who don't have those kind of solutions, we've seen a lot of people thinking about emigrating or talking about it, because we've seen the domicile rules change recently as well. And, Nimesh, maybe you could explain what's going on there.
Yeah, not all the press talk has been about non-doms and wealthy billionaires like Lakshmi Mittal leaving the UK. This is less around any of that. The rules, and we could talk about this all day, but when the non-dom rules changed and we went into a residency-based system for taxation, which makes a lot of sense, domicile is a strange concept for tax. The byproduct of this, and this was absolutely explicit when the Conservatives changed the rules this time so March last year, was that Brits who have been living abroad now won't be in the scope of UK inheritance tax. If provided they've been non-resident for 10 years. So I've got a number of expat clients who had a UK British domicile who were always caught within the UK inheritance tax net. But now they've been gone for 15, 20 years. Their overseas estate is completely protected from inheritance tax because of this byproduct from changing the non-dom rules. And that was done on purpose. So what we're seeing is actually less of the overseas individuals, so the Mittals of the world. In my client demographic, where we've got an even spread of non-doms and Brits, we're seeing more Brits leave the UK at varying degrees, but at the retirement point where you do have a bit of flexibility around actually emigrating abroad and maybe you don't have work and family necessarily to think about, they're leaving the UK, staying away for 10 years, you break the UK connection for inheritance tax on your overseas assets, and then come back and you have a 10-year free pass where you are still outside of the scope of UK inheritance tax. So people are planning around, okay, I'll leave in my mid-60s, come back in my mid-70s, and I hope I die between 75 and 85. People are planning around that, about how they can have that cycle and having this almost 10-year free holiday to begin with to get out of inheritance tax.
Yeah, and some regimes will have very good tax on income and capital gains too. So there can be other advantages in doing that.
Yeah, and so should say pensions, because if you go to a country which is a favourable double tax treaty, you could access your pension in that period of non-residence without having the UK income tax on it. Mm-hmm. You need to look at what the local rules may say, but that also might be, again, a helpful byproduct of you leaving the UK. Now, I'm definitely not one of those people who will be wanting to push people out of the UK, but people are doing this off their own backs.
Yeah, but they're not usually doing it only for tax reasons, I think. So I think usually people move abroad because they've got the connection or the property or the love of the country first, and then this is all a benefit on top of that. But, there may be a few examples where people just go, right, that's it, I'm going to find somewhere great to move to for 10 years. Brilliant. We're getting close to our time, so I'm going to ask each of the panellists for a top tip. But maybe, Lindsay, have we changed your mind at all on your own strategy?
You're not going to leave, are you?
No, I'm not leaving the country. I am thinking of looking after my second son, because that's using other assets, and therefore that will mitigate the tax on the pension. But I also think, for tips, this whole taxing the pensions is going to be very messy. Now, my pensions are quite sorted out now. They're all in one area that has low charges and is quite good performance. I would imagine most people who are younger than me have 7 or 8 pensions, some they've lost contact with. So my tip is, never mind inheritance tax, get your pensions all sorted out, because when you die, your executor is going to have a real mess trying to find out how much tax is going to be paid, and they could even be fined for not paying the inheritance tax on time if they don't know what it is. So, get yourself sorted out.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Nimesh, what's your top tip?
I'm a big fan of really keeping it simple. We can tie ourselves up in knots over inheritance tax planning, but a gifting strategy, I think a little bit of life insurance along the way, doing those simple things, starting early as well. Malvee mentioned the story of my 2-year-old now who's got built up a pot of stakeholder pensions and ISAs, and at some point we'll start thinking about maybe some discretionary trusts for her, and we've got another child on the way as well. Starting that early and not getting then and taking some advice around actually what your future wealth should look like and your cash flow should look like, which again Malvee touched on. You don't need all that money, and so gifting away at the outset earlier is what I would do.
Yeah, and you do start very early, don't you?
I did. So I started on day one, much to my wife's annoyance when she had just given birth and a screaming baby in the corner of the maternity ward. I was there on my laptop setting up stakeholder pensions and ISAs.
I love it.
My daughter was born on the 12th of January, which was great for tax because she got into that tax year.
Oh, yeah. Then you do another one in April. Yeah.
Another one in April. Yeah.
That's great. I love it. Malvee, what's your words of wisdom?
My advice is to start early as well. And I think, when it comes to inheritance tax planning, don't think that, leave it to your 70s, 80s when you have the money. Start doing a little bit along the way. Every year, do a little bit of thinking about where you are. And this is where I think paying for advice is a really good thing. I'd rather pay a small percentage to a planner that knows what they're doing and is giving me the right advice than pay 40% on the way out. That's the way I would think about it. So yeah, and then there's loads of other benefits as well from by doing it early and doing a little bit every year. There's other income tax benefits and things as well. So yeah,
great. So and from what I take from you guys, it's looking at the whole picture.
Yeah.
We were talking about it in relation to pensions, but you really have to look at your whole financial picture and what inheritance tax might happen
and how
there.
it will grow over the years as well. You think you might not have a sizable property now or a sizable portfolio, but actually over the course of 10 years, 20 years, inflation does rack up, and by modelling what your property is going to be valued at in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years time, gives you an understanding of where you sit inheritance tax wise.
Yeah, and I would add my own tip is talk to your children or your potential beneficiaries about what you're doing and make sure that they have an understanding, and they may even have some suggestions as what they might want to happen. And not for spending the money, but they may be really on board with what you want to do. So, and you may be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to all my panellists. We are going to hang around for a little bit afterwards if anyone wants to ask any questions. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.